Hey everybody, Huples Cat. My partner Kitty told me this morning that the drums of war are beating loudly, and I think she's absolutely correct.
Kaliningrad, nearly 1,000 miles from the rest of Russia. The most practical way to get supplies like coal and metals to this enclave by the Baltic Sea is by train. But that supply route has hit the buffers thanks to EU sanctions over Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Kaliningrad might be 800 miles from Moscow, but it's strategically important. The Baltic Fleet is headquartered there. But with no land border, Russia has sent goods by rail and road through Lithuania. Now the EU member has refused to allow some Russian goods to pass. Moscow will have to try to send them by sea.
I have a pre-written war plan so I can escalate my actions depending on what's actually going on rather than emotionally. But today, June 22nd, 2022, I've actually decided to alter it. The next escalation point that I'm at is NATO or Russian forces actually physically engaging with each other. And I kind of envisioned that on a small scale, but I've altered it. Well, why did I alter it? Stay tuned, this video will tell you why. So the escalation will now be different. If NATO or Russian forces attack each other's civilian targets like a commercial trawler or a power plant or anything of those lines, I actually will take that as a sign to escalate before actual violent forces are actually engaging with each other.
This example shows that you cannot trust either verbal statements by the West or written ones.
Russia's not the only people that actually distrust America right now.
The wife of basketball superstar Brittany Griner says she has, quote, zero trust in the U.S. government after it botched a plan to have the couple speak on Saturday for the first time since Brittany Griner was detained in Russia 4 months ago. Brittany Griner tried calling 11 times Saturday but couldn't reach her wife on what was their 4th anniversary. The plan was for the call to go through the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, but no one was working on Saturday to connect the call. Brittany's wife, Sherelle Griner, told the Associated Press, quote, "I find it unacceptable, and I have zero trust in our government right now. If I can't trust you to catch a Saturday call outside business hours, how can I trust you to actually be negotiating on my wife's behalf to come home," she said.
The American embassy in Moscow is not working on weekends. Really?
Russia will certainly respond to such hostile actions. Appropriate measures are being worked out between departments and will be taken in the near future. Their consequences will have a serious negative impact on the population of Lithuania.
Exactly what the consequences might be, economic or military, Russia didn't say. But bear in mind, Lithuania is a member of NATO, and any military action would draw a response from the alliance as a whole.
The alteration is really there because I can't see Russia having any choice now. Russia has to pull out of Ukraine completely and accept the fact that they have initiated war for reasons they believe are true and that they've failed and they have to give up. Or they're going to have to attack Lithuania. But Lithuania is part of NATO since 2004, even though it borders Russia. Lithuania is part of NATO. There's NATO troops from various places. I'm not sure about Canada, but I think Germany's got a large presence there right now. So any Russian attack on Lithuania will inevitably trigger Article 5, I believe, because I believe that's what this is all about. But Russia is telling NATO quite clearly, stop talking about Article 5, you're increasing the rhetoric and you're making it more likely that we'll have a war. The phrase absolutely unacceptable needs a bit of explanation here. Kaliningrad was Russia's prize at the end of 1945 when Germany was beaten. It was a German enclave in 1938 and Hitler used that as an excuse to actually unify a greater Germany to get the enclaves together. So the really outlying enclaves were broken up at the end of 1945. All the Germans who lived there and lived there for a long time had to leave and go back to East or West Germany, and it became Russian. And Russia put a lot of people in. Kaliningrad is fairly big, not that big, but it is Russian. And it actually is about 800 miles from Russia. So could World War III start over unification of Russian enclaves, much like World War II started with German reunification of Germanic enclaves? World War II had a lot of other reasons, as would World War III, but essentially that was one of the main trigger points. So Lithuania is banning Russia sending by train from Russia to Kaliningrad, which is Russian, over Lithuanian territory without ever leaving the railway line. It's banning steel and some petrochemicals. About 50% of all the normal imports have been banned. Lithuania says it's not a blockade. Russia says it's a blockade. It doesn't really matter which either side calls it. The effect of it is this. Russia's Baltic Sea fleet is based in Kaliningrad. There isn't really another all-year-round port it could use. And banning petrochemicals and steel means that that fleet will become inoperable very, very quickly.
Дистанция 12 километров, курс 90, установлены. 10-й, я улевой. 4-й прием.
The consequences of World War III are absolutely unthinkable. The consequences of a conventional war are also equally unthinkable and appalling. In Ukraine right now, about 10% of all civilian casualties of the war are traumatic amputations. One Israeli bandage is not going to cut it if we start to have a conventional war that involves North America or Europe. Russia called the EU ambassador in. That's actually one of the last trigger points before actual violent war.
And here I had the opportunity to make clear the EU position that there is no such thing as a banning of transit, there is no such thing as a blockade. I appealed to the Russian side to remain cool-headed, not to escalate.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine, Russia is escalating its assault in the east. The city of Severodonetsk now feels like the epicenter of the fighting. Russian forces have captured almost all of the city. And in a grim echo of the siege of the Azovstal steelworks in Mariupol, they've pushed Ukrainian soldiers and hundreds of civilians back to this chemical factory.
I think he gets it. We are as close to nuclear war as we have been since 1961 and the Cuban Missile Crisis. We are very close to Russia attacking a NATO country.
Этот пример показывает, что
Nikolai Patrushev, the secretary of Russia's Security Council, was quoted by Russian state news agency RIA saying Lithuania's actions showed Russia could not trust the West, adding that appropriate measures were being worked out and would be taken in the near future.
Make no mistake here, we need more Georgia, not war, but all I'm hearing and all I'm seeing is both sides are saying war.
Lithuania and Brussels say EU sanctions have obliged it to enforce the ban. Speaking after EU envoy Markus Ederer appeared at the Russian Foreign Ministry, an EU spokesperson said that Ederer had explained that Lithuania is implementing European Union sanctions and that there is no blockade, as well as asking Russia to refrain from escalatory steps and rhetoric.
The effect of the sanctions that Lithuania is imposing on Russia means that the Baltic Sea fleet of Russia will be inoperable quite quickly. Modern naval vessels need a lot of stuff that's been banned by the Lithuanians as part of the sanctions. I can't see Russia just going, okay, but what about the Kaliningrad people?
Kaliningrad's residents have been urged not to panic buy, but many said they were starting to worry.
Construction works will stop. Development of roads, it's all only going to get worse. I think we should pack up our belongings and leave, because you can't go anywhere. This has never happened before.
I believe he's correct. 2022 is a very, very dangerous time and a unique time in the history of the human species.
Да, это беспилотник. Да блин, где ты там? Да нет, конечно. Не вижу. Ебать! Охуеть! Завод взрывается тут. Охуеть! Такие дела, чуваки, блин, такие дела. Стороны Украины, да, прилетел? Ну да, с той стороны прилетел. Что, работа останавливаем, нет? Завод горит, бегите.
Of course now, Western supplied ammunitions and arms to Ukraine are now being used by Ukraine without any control from the West to strike targets, civilian targets inside of Russia. Now you can argue, and I'm sure people will, that so what? The so what here is Ukraine gave away its nuclear weapons, Russia did not. And again, it's leaving Russia with a choice. If these attacks continue onwards, Russia can completely surrender and pull out of the Ukraine, including the Russian-speaking provinces that it believes should be part of Russia, or it goes into full war mode and takes out a lot of the infrastructure that we're using to put arms into Ukraine. So at a minimum here, I see Russia actually stopping pretty much all of its gas and oil exports to the West and to Europe very, very soon. This is going to cause Europe and North America huge economic stress and pain, and in the winter it's going to cause an incredible amount of deaths in Europe by cold. Alternative power sources, mothball power stations, cannot be just turned on overnight. It's going to take 5 to 10 years. Nuclear power takes at least 10 years to build. Please note that Faith Birol is actually the head of the IEA, the International Energy Agency. She knows of what she speaks. She states that the European governments are not restricting the use of natural gas fast enough and bringing in alternative power sources fast enough to avoid probable rationing of natural gas this winter in Europe. Think about that for a minute. No natural gas coming out of the pipes for parts of the day or all of the day or weeks at a time. The cost of propane cylinders will go through the roof. That is definitely going to have a knock-on effect in North America. We are definitely going to see both an economic gain if we can still sell our natural gas to Europe and ship it over there. But how we're going to ship it over there to replace Russian pipelines, I don't know. But it will cause an incredible increase in the cost of propane. Everything's world market price. Me and you are going to have to pay for the increased cost of propane this winter, not just people in Germany and Lithuania. Through a different pipeline, Italy is also seeing a huge drop in the amount of natural gas that Russia is adding into the pipeline for sale onto Western European customers. And Russia is actually blaming Canada. They're claiming that Canada is not supplying parts they need to keep the pumping up because of the sanctions that have happened from the West. Now, whether that's true or not is kind of irrelevant. There's no strategic gain for Russia in selling gasoline and natural gas to Europe to allow them to have enough stores to get through the winter unscathed. Russia is definitively looking at this, and I'm sure thinking, how can we make enough money from these people to function, but at the same time prevent them from storing natural gas for the winter? Because nothing changes at people's hearts and minds about supporting Ukraine like freezing to death and having tens of possibly hundreds of thousands of people in a cold snap dying. That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Be safe out there. Don't worry about this too much. But the time has come to actually have a good look at the strategic balance that's happening right now and what your plans are, what your concrete actions are to deal with it. I think we really do need to have a think about this. This is evolving in a much stranger way than I ever predicted. You know, we could be looking at a land war in Europe that may not involve NATO, and it may involve NATO, I don't know. It may or may not involve escalation outside of the theatre of conflict. I don't know. Doodles. This has been a Lazy Terrier 2022 production from his Ottawa studio.